August of 2024 celebrated Five Nights at Freddy's 10-year anniversary. This celebration included the release of demos, collabs, future project announcements, as well as the subject of today's video, the game version of Into the Pit. Hi fellas, my name is Teddy Clyde, and I have too many opinions on things that do not matter. As I assume most of you already know, the FNAF franchise started out as a pretty simple horror game set in a pizzeria with the main goal of not getting killed by one of the animatronics, who are known to get a little quirky at night. It has since evolved into 11 mainline games, multiple spin-off/DLC games, over 50 books, 2 movies, a third one's on its way, and way more Funko Pops than I thought was, humanly possible. FNAF Into the Pit, released in 2019, is the first of the short story series Fazbear Frights, which fits in the same general niche as the Goosebumps books. It and its sequel series, the Tales of the Pizzaplex, all consist of 3 main stories as well as an epilogue. The epilogues all kind of tie into each other, but the individual stories stand alone and also, importantly, take place in a different continuity than the mainline games. For those of you not super into FNAF, the distinction between what continuity something takes place in is very important lore-wise, as a lot of the things contain the same characters and plot beats, but aren't directly happening in the same universe. This is not super important to the Into the Pit story that I'm talking about today. However, it is vaguely touched upon later, so just thought I'd bring that up. When the game of Into the Pit came out, I, as most of the older fans of the series, had not read any of the books and only really knew some broad stroke plot points because of MatPat, and even then it was very specific stories. Into the Pit was mentioned, but it was not that important. But as it was deemed an important enough story to make a game out of for the 10-year anniversary, I figured I must check it out to see why it was important. So without further ado, here is a pretty reasonable deep dive summary into the plot of the book. The book opens with our main character, who's a 10-year-old boy named Oswald, sitting in the car with his father on his way to the last day of school for the year. Looking around town, we can see it is a shell of its former self, what it was a booming town 3 years ago before the mill had closed. The mill had employed a lot of the people in the town, so after its closure, most people lost their jobs, a lot of people moved away, including our main character's best friend, Ben, which has left our boy Oswald really quite lonely. His family stayed due to his mom's job at the hospital, which he doesn't love, and he has no friends. Yay. Getting to school, a kid named Dylan immediately starts bullying our main character, Oswald, calling him Oswald the Ocelot, which is a reference to a kid's show in the FNAF universe. As a fun little fact, I think this is also referencing the kids' show put on by Nickelodeon called Oswald, which is about a large blue octopus, with the Oswald the Ocelot being described as large and pink, so there's some clear parallels happening in there. It's also worth mentioning, Oswald gets made fun of for having the same name as Lee Harvey Oswald, the guy who killed JFK, which is kind of funny, objectively, just a little funny. Anyhow, so since it is the last day of school, these kids are learning nothing. So they're allowed to just kind of goof off on their computers, on their phones, but Oswald just kind of sits by himself, drawing fun little robotic creatures. I wonder if this is a reference to something that'll happen later in this story. But again, he's just kind of moping around all day as all the other kids are talking about all of their cool summer plans that they have, where Oswald really just doesn't have any because he doesn't have any friends or money. So he's just bumming it at this point. To remedy his problem of having no summer plans, Oswald's dad later that night suggests that he could come into town with him on his way to work, and he could spend his days hanging out at the library and then getting some Jeff's Pizza for lunch. Now, Jeff's as a place is kind of crappy and sad, but it is the only pizza place left in town after the mill closed, so it's better than nothing. So Oswald is all in. The first day of summer has a cute little scene of Oswald and his mom having breakfast, which he's really excited about because he doesn't get to see her as often as he'd like because she works really crazy hours at the hospital. He then heads to the library where he hangs out and has to wait to use the computer because there's a lot of other people ahead of him. He does note, however, that a lot of those people are homeless, and this is a safe place for them to stay in the daytime before sleeping on the streets, because again, the mill closed. Like, I just want to acknowledge that this is a FNAF story, and a little bit of a spoiler alert, has a time-traveling ball pit in it, and they take the time to acknowledge some of the harsher realities in life in a really delicate way, and it's still approachable to the middle school audience that this book is made for. So I really just want to give it props for that. So he's hanging out at the library, heads to Jeff's. Once he gets to Jeff, he notes it's generally pretty empty in there. There is painted walls where there clearly had been a mural of some either animals or people, animals. There's an empty stage, and there is a roped off ball pit. Also within Jeff's Pizza is Jeff. I love Jeff, we'll get to that. But he is literally the only person who works in Jeff's Pizza, and he looks like shit. At least the pizza is allegedly good. Now, to quickly explain why I love Jeff of Jeff's Pizza, he is a mess. He is described as having bloodshot eyes, his apron is stained, and you know what? He has a heart of gold. Getting to the plot of the book, Oswald is hanging out in one of the booths and has fallen asleep while reading a book. Jeff comes up to him and offers him some leftover pizza from lunch and then gets him a new drink for free because he knows Oswald can't afford a second piece. Now, it is never explicitly stated this is happening, but it's pretty clear this is what is happening. To quote, "It was funny. Jeff's expression never changed. He looked tired and miserable even when he was being extra nice. This is my new little guy, and I love him so much." In the story, we now get a fun little time jump. So, the past few weeks, it was kind of fun to start with, but it has gotten really old doing the same routine over and over and over again. His family will hang out sometimes, or Ben will text him, but it does not make up for the fact that he has the same routine and still has no money to do it with. So he ends up getting into a big fight with his dad. He then mopes about all day, and then once he even gets to Jeff's, he deems him as creepy and that he looked 100 years old, but probably was just 30. My man has done nothing to you. Keep his good name out of your mouth. Anyhow, Oswald, being, 10, decides that he is fed up and he doesn't want to go and meet his father outside. He is going to make his father come find him, and it's time to now hide in a ball pit that is roped off, because nothing bad will ever happen in the ball pit. Yay! Surprise, surprise, the ball pit is pretty gross. It smells bad, and then staying in there for any length of time is starting to make Oswald feel pretty claustrophobic, so he decides to get out of the ball pit. When he emerges, he finds himself no longer in Jeff's Pizza, but surrounded by a bunch of flashing lights and bright colors, arcade cabinets lining the walls, and just so much fun. There are kids roaming everywhere, and they are dressed in kinda odd and 80s looking attire. He looks to the stage, which in Jeff's had been empty, and finds an animatronic band playing songs. He thinks to himself, they're kind of creepy looking. They remind him a lot of the drawings he did, but these are creepy, and his were only a little creepy. In pretty much no time at all, this kid jumps to the conclusion he is no longer in Jeff's Pizza, but what was there before Jeff's Pizza, which is Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Oswald quickly meets a couple of kids in the past and immediately makes the time traveler's easiest mistake of referring to the games around him as old when they are very obviously new for the time, but he moves past it pretty quickly. The kids, Chip and Mike, invite him to go play skee-ball with them, and as they head over there, they pass a man in a yellow rabbit suit, which, could mean nothing. They play for a long time, they're having a blast, and hours later, Oswald realizes, oh my god, my dad, might be a little worried about me since I've been gone for hours, so he decides to go and head back home through the pit. Once out of the pit, he goes to check his phone to see what time it is and realizes no time has passed in the present. Oswald is now living at large with his new summer plans of just hanging out in the 1980s. His new bestie Chip has given him the nickname Oz, as in the Wizard of. He's giving him free pizza, he's hanging out with him, and it's just giving him the friendship he was severely lacking in the present day. Oswald is just kind of ignoring the giant, creepy yellow rabbit suit dude, but that's not gonna matter. He has new friends to play with. It's fine. So, it is becoming a little bit of a problem that Oz is from the future and does not understand a lot of the pop culture references the kids are using, but they do just brush past it and kind of assume that he is just deeply sheltered. He is starting to feel bad that he is just mooching off of them, constantly getting free pizza, getting the tokens for the game, and so as he's lamenting about this, a bunch of game tokens, appear randomly and magically in his pocket. And he's like, I guess we'll use it. I forgot I was wearing these pants today. Which, is a crazy move. This is literally never brought up again. So, I understand from a story standpoint, we do have to have a magic time traveling ball pit for this whole story to function. But, again, this is never brought up, so why does this need to happen? I just have more questions than answers. In the present day, Oswald starts asking his dad about what it was like to be a kid in the 80s, and with some further questioning, his father gets a little cagey about the Freddy Fazbear's establishment, but it's probably fine. Then Oswald goes about the rest of his day as normal by heading directly to Jeff's and directly into the pit to go hang out with his buddies. Instead of the regular sounds of the arcades and all the kids around, it has all been replaced with screaming. So, Oswald, worried for his friends, goes to look for them, and pretty quickly makes eye contact with the yellow rabbit, who is beckoning him through a door labeled private. Through this hallway and into the party room, the rabbit leads him, and once he enters the party room, he sees 6 kids. They are lined up on the floor in front of one of the murals. They have party hats on their head, and they are dead. Oswald freaks out and rushes out of there. He knows that the yellow rabbit has to be the one who did this, and so he heads back to the ball pit and back to the present. In the present, waiting for him, are Jeff and his father, who are mad because he went into the ball pit. They have no idea how dangerous the ball pit really is, but it's still dangerous. It's a gross ball pit. His father starts yelling at him about it a little bit before 2 yellow arms come out of the ball pit and drag him in. What emerges from this pit is not Oswald's father, but the yellow rabbit, who quickly starts guiding Oswald out of the restaurant. The kid is certain that Jeff is going to say something, but all that the man says is, "See you later, guys." Unbeknownst to Oswald, he is the only person who can tell that that is not his dad, that is a man in a yellow rabbit suit, not his father. But he's just stuck like this. So on the drive home, he starts trying to question the rabbit, but the rabbit remains silent and just has a horrible grin plastered on its face. Once inside, he rushes upstairs and locks himself in his room, but he can hear the yellow rabbit pacing. He calls his mother because obviously there is something wrong with his father and tells her about this emergency, but when she shows up, she sees nothing wrong with her husband, because obviously she doesn't. And so she's now just kind of worried about Oswald instead. And he tries to convince himself that this is just something he just made up, that's all in his head, but it's clear that he does not believe himself. Breakfast the next morning starts out decently well until he realizes that his father is still, a creepy yellow rabbit suit dude, and his mother still does not see anything wrong with this. And just to add fuel to the fire, it happens to be the first day back at school, so guess who's getting a ride from creepy weird rabbit dude father? Oswald is. Once he gets into school, Dylan, who is the bully, tries to bully him some more, but it really does not work. Oswald has much more important things to be worrying about right now. At lunch, there happens to be a new girl that he talks to, and she just happens to have a convenient little pep talk to him that tells him, like, oh, it's good to be brave and stand up for things, yada yada. And now, after that little pep talk, Oswald has all the motivation he needs to go save his father that he clearly didn't have before. So he hatches a plan. This plan starts out with just acting through the rest of the day that everything is A-okay, everything's fine, everything's normal. Once it gets well past dark, he breaks out of his house to go to where it all started, back into the ball pit. So, once at Jeff's, it's luckily open, so, no breaking and entering on that end. He tells Jeff that to get him a soda, so Jeff ends up going to the back, and once Jeff is out of sight, that man runs straight into the pit. In the pit, Oswald feels a shoe that is connected to a leg, that is connected to a body, of what he hopes is his still alive father. He pulls all the dead weight out into the present-day Jeff's restaurant, but of course the Yellow Rabbit has followed him there. They get into a little bit of a fight, but in the process, the Yellow Rabbit gets tangled up in the netting surrounding the ball pit. Though Oswald also gets real bit in the arm, so that's not great for him. They fight some more, and Oswald prevails as the Yellow Rabbit gets more and more tangled up in the netting and accidentally hangs himself in the process. As the light leaves the eyes of the Yellow Rabbit, the life returns to his father, who is dazed but alive. The man is so confused on how he got there, and Oswald's explanation is, you slipped on a ball in the ball pit and got a concussion. As the pair walk out, Jeff calls out to them, "Hey kid, you forgot your soda." And that is where we end it. There is nothing more. Happy ending for all. I think the imagery within the story is really strong and really good. I think how they put the sense of doom, of knowing something's going to go wrong, and that the Yellow Rabbit has something to do with it, but Oswald truly having no connection to these characters, so has no real idea of what could happen, is a very interesting storyline. And even though it is a book written for primarily like middle schoolers, it is a well-done horror story, and the Yellow Rabbit is a very interesting and creepy antagonist without fully going into this is William Afton and all that entails. So, to me, it's clear that this was not selected as a 10-year anniversary game story just because it happened to be the first of the short stories, but because it's genuinely a good and well-done story. However, with the story we are presented, a possible gameplay is not directly visible. Most of the time of the story is spent either prior to the ball pit just doing establishing stuff, or hanging out in the 1980s just goofing off. It's clear that in a game, they would need to make the Yellow Rabbit more of a active problem to Oswald significantly earlier on, because within the story, it is 2/3 of the way through before the screaming and everyone dying incident starts happening, before his father gets replaced, before all of the actual problems. The Yellow Rabbit's just kind of creeping around for 2/3 of the book. So, major changes clearly need to be made. It is worth mentioning that in 2022, a graphic novel version of the book came out, and other than kind of making the story a little less nuanced and having a slightly less, words, because, it's a graphic novel, it does keep the story mostly the same. My only personal gripe is that they make Jeff look awful in it. He looks like upper 50s, and I know that Oswald that one time did describe him as looking 100 years old, but, obviously the guy was exaggerating, and he did say he's supposed to look 30, so it just seemed like a weird choice, and they did not need to do him that dirty. While we're on the subject of the art style, I do want to just talk about the game's art style and what they go with, because I think it is done very well. They clearly are inspired by a lot of the 16-bit video games that were very popular in the 80s, and this makes sense as the story being told is taking place in the 80s for a lot of it, so they're really paying homage to that. I don't love how their faces look. Something about them's a little off-putting, but the longer you sit with them, the more you get used to them, so I don't hate them now, but they weren't my favorite. I do think the best design choice for the game, by far, is how the Yellow Rabbit looks. He is horrifying, and especially when they give him the full screen as opposed to his little sprite character moving around, they can put in a lot of horror and gross detail into him in a way that I didn't realize pixel art could do in a game like this. Getting back to the actual reason for this video, the plot of the story, the game opens with Oswald sketching out some of the animatronics, but it's fairly quickly cut to him and his father in the car on their way to Jeff's, which is their daily summer routine, with no library in sight. One of the major changes in this game is that instead of taking place at the beginning of summer and then throughout the summer, this is starting on the last day of summer. So Oswald is going to be starting school tomorrow. He is looking forward to not having to go to Jeff's every day and only having to deal with it on the weekends. But otherwise, it is pretty similar. There's also the introduction of how much the family is refusing to leave and how Oswald's not super fond of it in this opening scene. Once in Jeff's, Oswald overhears a family talking about an old ball pit that used to be in here, and it is no longer in the main room, so Oswald has not seen it around, and he decides to go looking for it. At this point, you, as a player, now get full control of moving Oswald around and get to free roam to a certain extent. If you don't immediately start going to the ball pit, you can go talk to my beloved boy Jeff, who luckily looks like a disheveled 30 as opposed to a grandfather. Either way, you head to the ball pit, and once you go through, surprise, surprise, it's the 1980s, and it's now a Freddy Fazbear's. Who would have guessed? To go on a little side tangent about this opening scene in the past, some of the dialogue implies that it's happening in 1984 specifically, with some of the kids talking about how they're going to go see Ghostbusters, which came out in June of 1984. This does not really matter to the plot, but it does tie into the game's timeline, as the kids who are killed in the book and game of Into the Pit are killed in a very similar way as the missing children's incident. This is how the main four animatronics plus Golden Freddy end up getting haunted, as the kids who are killed in this incident are shoved inside and then haunt them. Most people put the missing children's incident either in the year of 1985 or 1987, which neither is 1984, only further reinforcing the idea that this game is happening very separately than the main games. However, if you just play the game a little bit further, we see a calendar with the year 1985 on it telling us that it is occurring in June of 1985. And not to nitpick the dialogue of this game, and it's literally one or two lines of dialogue, but just pick a movie that came out a year later like The Goonies. And you could argue that these kids are watching it a year later. However, find me a kid in the 1980s who didn't know Ghostbusters. I'm sorry, this is ridiculous. Back to the actual game, it continues on pretty much like the book, where Oswald runs into Chip and Mike and they kind of interact, but the only real addition is that you get to explore the world a little bit more, because it's a video game. Also part of the game is that you get to play some of the arcade games in the pizzeria. So you end up playing skee-ball with Chip and Mike, which is pretty fun. They end up then suggesting, hey, what if we played some hide-and-seek? So now you get to explore the pizzeria a little bit more. And as you are looking for a place to hide, you end up in the back rooms where you find a slumped-over Freddy suit in the same position that Golden Freddy is always depicted in. And because, of course, you now have to go hide in that suit. While hiding in the suit, the lights go out and the Yellow Rabbit starts slowly crossing your vision, which is now introducing a new game mechanic. This is not necessarily one of the more important ones, but I do think it's kind of fun. So, while hiding in the suit, you have to hold your breath, but you only get a certain limited amount of time to hold it, so timing when you start holding it is important, or else the Yellow Rabbit will get you. Once the Yellow Rabbit is out of your field of vision, people start screaming and the horror that we know is going to happen starts ensuing. Some other game mechanics worth mentioning while we're at it are the noise mechanic, so certain actions like running for too long or certain things you can interact with will make a lot of noise, which can be really bad because it will attract the rabbit, or will be good because you're trying to attract the rabbit to a certain location. The last notable mechanic are the QuickTime events, where if you don't click the certain button in a specific amount of time, QuickTime, it's kind of in the name, you will die. Just as in the book, Oswald goes to find his friends and catches the eye of the yellow rabbit, who beckons him to go see the dead kids. It is not as explicitly clear if the kids are dead in this one, but, So it then follows pretty much as it was in the original story. The rabbit chases him through the restaurant and then into present day where his father and Jeff are waiting for him. Then, his father gets yoinked and woo, rabbit dad. A fun visual thing that they do is anytime Oswald is alone with his rabbit father, it is a rabbit. But anytime there's someone else looking at him, it is his father, but with glowing eyes. Also, I want to reiterate that we are at the beginning of this game and 2/3 of the way through the original story. In the game, once you're back at home, you have to go steal Dad's cell phone because Oswald does not have one of his own. If you call 911 at this point, you end up getting a little message basically saying, hey, due to budgetary reasons, 911 has been disconnected in your area, which is just one of many silly little Easter eggs hidden throughout the game. Calling mom goes just about as well as it does in the book. She comes home and sees nothing wrong with her husband. And Oswald is like, well, obviously, Dad's stuck in the 1980s, so I have to go back immediately tonight to go get him. Once out of the house, a map appears where you can visit multiple different locations, including your house, the school, the mill, the library, and Jeff's Pizza. One of my biggest gripes with this game, though, is going to the library is only useful one time. Like, you can only go to the library and do anything there once, where going to the mill is important and needed for the plot multiple times, which is just kind of a weird change from the book, as going to the library was a regular occurrence and we never went to the mill in that story. And I think you could have easily just kept it that way and had all of the mill stuff happening at the library or a different location. So it's a strange thing that did not need to happen. Once you've gone back to Jeff's and then through the ball pit to go find your dad in the past, you quickly encounter a kid trapped in a springlock endoskeleton suit. So now you're on a side quest to save that kid. Throughout the game, there are little things you can go and grab and pick up that'll be useful later on the line, but other things you will need in a direct objective to go find. So, in this case, you will need to go grab Jeff's keys in the present day to go open a door in the past to get a screwdriver so you can release this kid. Nothing can be that easy though, so Oswald's side quest of saving this kid now has a side quest of its own because Jeff won't give you his keys unless you go take the trash out for him and take it to the mill. Once at the mill, there's a fun little Easter egg of seeing the little trash in the gang, and I think that's very fun and silly. Big fan of that. Anywho, so you take the trash out, come back, Jeff gives you his keys, you go get the screwdriver in the past and save that kid. Now it is a scripted fight against the yellow rabbit as he then starts chasing you, so you go back to the present day where it is safe and end of night one at that point. The next morning we get a breakfast scene that plays out pretty identically to the one in the book, in the same, oh, it wasn't all a dream and my mother still doesn't realize that her husband is a weird creepy yellow rabbit dude situation. Anywho, so, his rabbit father takes him to school, and stuff at school goes also pretty much the same. He gets bullied by Dylan, but the only real addition is at recess there happens to be a kid playing on the playground with some firecrackers, and Oswald, being the smart, big-brained boy that he is like, I gotta have me some of those because that will help me in this whole situation I'm stuck in. So that is our new current goal. However, we can't just have the firecrackers, so we have to have something cool to trade with the firecracker kid in order to get some firecrackers. So as we continue playing the game, we will have to keep our eyes out for something cool to be traded with. But that is not a current problem. Once Oswald has left the school, he runs into the same girl and has much of the same dialogue as what occurs in the book. However, she ends up giving you her grandfather's sketchbook, which contains some specs of the animatronics and details about their personalities, which will be kind of clues on how to solve some puzzles later in the game. You head back home and pretty much immediately start trying to get to Jeff's. One fun little thing about the game is anytime you leave the house, any subsequent nights, that way you left has now been blocked off. So if you leave out the front door, it will be locked, or if you leave out your window, it will be boarded up. So you can start to get a little more creative the further the game goes on. This night, despite you're still looking for your father, Oswald realizes another kid is stuck in the pizzeria, though this one is trapped in the kitchen, and Chica is the one trapping them there. So he decides that he needs to lure her out using a slice of pizza. To do this, he'll need to go back into the future to go bother Jeff about getting a slice. Jeff, however, declines just giving him pizza, so Oswald moves on to plan B, which is distracting Jeff long enough to steal the piece of pizza. He does this by taking a rat he finds in the past and releasing it into Jeff's pizza, which, is a good, useful distraction. So, with new pizza in hand, he lures Chica out of the way of the kitchen, and he finds Mike in there, his good buddy. So, they run to the entrance. Mike ends up escaping, but of course the yellow rabbit goes and chases after Oswald, so he hops back into the pit and goes to safety in his home, and to night two. The next day at school, Oswald is starting to have some vague hallucinations while in class, and his teacher notices he's not doing so hot, so sends him to the principal's office to go fetch him a book so he can kind of take a moment to himself. While in the principal's office, while he's grabbing the book, he ends up finding a sticky slap hand and grabs it because it will be useful later in the game. Nothing much else happens at the school, and it is primarily used as a grabbing things situation, not much plot relevance. This night portion goes pretty much the same as the past two. It starts out with escaping, then you head to Jeff's, then you head through the ball pit, and then you look for your dad. Once in there, we can use the sticky hand that we got earlier to grab a set of keys to the arcade that have gotten stuck in a vent. It is unclear how they got there, and we will never know. Once in the arcade, we see that Bonnie is in there with another one of the kids that was stuck in the pizzeria. So, time to lure Bonnie out. Through the stuff that is mentioned in the notebook, we know that he probably will come if we play his guitar. So, we need to go do that. We find his guitar in one of the back rooms, but notice that it needs to be restrung. The game tells us that extra strings might be found in the garbage. So, time to go to the garbage pile at the mill in the present to get strings for Bonnie's guitar. 'Cause that makes sense, I guess. Once you get to the mill, you realize that Dylan the bully is, also there for some reason, and he decides to take a picture of you while you're rummaging through the trash to bully you later with. Oswald does not care because he has significantly more important things to worry about than a 10-year-old piece of shit, so he heads out to go play Bonnie's guitar in the past. This works, and Bonnie immediately races after you. Once you have escaped, you can go into the arcade and realize that Chip is the guy who is stuck there. So you untie his ties and he runs out. Then the animatronics start chasing you and you head home for the night. From this night onward, also in the arcade, all the arcade cabinets you can play and earn tickets at. So that's just a fun little thing. Anyway, end of night 3. I wonder how many nights could be left. It's almost like it's in the name of the franchise. Back at school the next day, our little guy starts having more vivid and horrifying hallucinations. He ends up punching what he sees as Freddy in front of him, but turns out to be the bully Dylan. So, oops, I guess, aw shucks, we hated that guy anyway, so it's fine. But Oswald's like, yikes, I just punched a kid, I should probably head out of school for the day. So, cool and fun. Now, today is the only day in which you can go to the library to go bother the kid about the firecrackers. So, hopefully, in your time playing, you've picked up one of the few things you can trade to get the firecrackers. This includes a Freddy mask, which can be found in your house, as well as a plush or a handheld gaming device. Once you're back in the past again, you find another kid trapped and screaming, though this time trapped in the security room by Freddy. If at this point you've already picked up the firecrackers, Oswald will automatically drop them on the ground to distract Freddy and rush in to go help the kid. Inside the security room, we do see the security cameras kind of from the OG FNAF games, which is kind of fun, as well as the kid. Now, I believe that this is maybe the only smart person in this game, as she refuses to leave until she knows that the animatronics are not outside the door, despite not actively being tied up. So, she sends Oswald to go make some noise to distract the animatronics. Once you've done that, unfortunately, she does end up getting caught again by the yellow rabbit, which we see on the security cameras when we go looking for her and she's not in the security room anymore. You then have to go looking for her around the pizzeria and find her in a deep freezer, which is locked, so you now have to, bust the door handle. This is done using a mallet attached to one of the arcade machines, so you smash the door handle and she books it out of there. She is fed up with this. And since the night needs to end there, you get scripted attacked by the yellow rabbit and head out for the night. Day 5 opens with Oswald having some nightmares and realizing he has slept the entire day away, which is real of him. He has also decided that tonight is the night. It all ends tonight, night 5. Who would have guessed? So, time to head back to Jeff's and back into the pit. Though, once at Jeff's, Oswald realizes that Jeff has locked the door to the ball pit room. Because Jeff's realized, hey, maybe people shouldn't be able to just go back in there. It's gross there. So, we need to go find Jeff to get the keys. He can be found in the back room playing solitaire on his computer, and we get the keys from him by lying. We say that we left our jacket in the ball pit room and our jacket has our wallet and we need our wallet to buy pizza. And this works on him. So we now have the keys. I love Jeff. In this game, he's kind of an idiot, but he's still my little guy, so c'est la vie. At this point, the yellow rabbit is sick and tired of us messing with all of his plots, so it is time for him to attack us in the present. And so to escape him, we rush to the past. Now, you might think, hey, isn't it time to save our dad now? But wait, there's one more kid trapped inside, this time in the party room. So, yay! And of course, the party room door is locked and we need a keycard to unlock the door. This keycard can be found in a blob/pile of animatronic situation, just shoved inside one of them. Anyhow, we get the keycard, open the party room door, and ask the girl, hey, have you seen our dad? And she's like, no, but I have heard some, random adult dude, mumbling/snoring in through the vent, so, and I'm sorry, kid, that's obviously him, right? You go through the vent to find your dad tied up in the middle of a room. You untie his ties, but the yellow rabbit is there, bursting through the door. He whisks your dad away. 'Cause of course, you just had him back, and now he is gone again. You search for the pair of them, but ultimately find them where it all started, in the ball pit room. The rabbit is fighting your dad, but as he sees you, he tosses that man aside and attacks you. Quick time events ensue. It kind of goes as it does in the book. You guys all end up in the ball pit and travel into the present day. The rabbit grabs your arm, you punch him in the face, and he ends up getting tangled up in the ropes and dying. You shake your dad awake, you have a lovely little conversation about getting out of this sad and small town, and you head home. And with that, you have the 2-star ending. You may be thinking, but besides all of the extra plot bits added to make it function as a game, we pretty much stuck to the story that was original to the book, so how did we not get the best ending? And what would even be included in a better ending? Now, FNAF Into the Pit is very similar to most of the newer FNAF games, as it has multiple endings that do change the story that is being presented depending on which one you get. This game includes 5 possible endings, though the highest you can do is 3 stars. Starting with the 0-star ending, if you failed the QuickTime event at the end of the game in the ball pit room, you will get the What Am I ending. The game will cut to Oswald standing on the stage and walking through the pizzeria as all the other animatronics creepily wave at him. He slowly loses his name, and by the end of it, his eyes glow as he fully loses himself. Pretty grim stuff, though most people aren't going to accidentally get this one, as it is literally one QuickTime event that you'd have to fuck up. The See Ya Dad, also known as the Hobo ending, is probably the easiest one to get, as all you have to do is walk right out the front doors in the 1980s pizzeria, and now you are just lost in the 1980s. This can be done on pretty much any night, so it's really easy to do just by seeing what would happen if you walked out the door. Most people are probably going to end up getting it if they're playing the game. Now, this is the first of the 1-star endings. The second of the 1-star endings is called Pity Party. As I established earlier, there is a lot of things for you to pick out throughout this game, and some of them are directly tied to what ending you get. In the past, you can find 5 items that your father has dropped around that are required to get a better ending. This includes 2 photos, his name tag, his wallet, and his ring. If you don't end up doing this, the end fight goes a little differently as the rabbit's timing is slightly off. You and your dad can get out into the present day and start talking a little bit, but the rabbit comes through later and grabs Oswald and drags him into the past. He then wakes up tied to a chair, he's got a party hat on his head, and the yellow rabbit's shadow over top of him, so you kind of know what's going to happen to him. So to get the 2-star ending that I walked us through, which is called Jeff ? All you really have to do is grab the 5 items that Dad has dropped around the pizzeria. There is also a secret photo that you have to grab, which is of William Afton and Henry Emily, or at least implied to be, as well as passing all the QuickTime events. But elsewise, you have the 2-star ending. The reason for the names of the ending is because there is an end credit scene. In this, Jeff leaves his office to find a trail of blood that he immediately worries is Oswald's because he gave that kid his keys, so yikes. He follows the trail into the ball pit room and sees the weird, creepy yellow rabbit suit tangled up in the ropes. He goes to further investigate and gets close enough, and he gets bit. Fade to black. My poor boy Jeff did not deserve this at all, and frankly, it was irresponsible of Oswald for not, making sure that rabbit was, definitely dead. The 3-star ending is by far the most complicated to get, as you have to grab a whole lot more stuff and do a whole lot more stuff with it. So, to get this, you need to find all of Dad's things. You need to find the extra photo. You need to find 10 arcade machine parts, go into the present arcade to fix the broken machines, play all of them. You need to get at least 80 tickets so that you can trade them in for the handheld gaming device, as well as 3 stickers that will go into your notebook. And lastly, you need to go on night 5 specifically in the past and play 3 secret mini games to get this good ending. If you end up doing all of that, the end fight scene goes a little bit differently. As the yellow rabbit is tied up in the ropes, you see him struggle a whole lot more, and when he finally dies, you really see the life leave his body. The end dialogue with your dad is changed up a little bit, but it's really not by that much. And it then all cuts to you, your dad, and your mom sitting at Jeff's eating a piece of pizza, finally happy. The place is booming because all of the arcade machines are fixed up, so truly a happy ending for all of us, because, my boy Jeff. But really, it is a lot of effort for not that much of a story change. It is a 5-second clip extra. Technically, the 2 and 3-star ending both fit in with what we see in the book, as the book ends with Oswald's talk with his father, and the endings differ by what happens after that. The only real major difference between the 2 endings is whether or not Jeff survives, which may only be important to me, But I also feel like I saw a lot of fan art of him when the game came out, so like maybe there's a bunch of extra like Jeff stands out there. The biggest difference to me, and I know I've already kind of pointed this out, is that instead of lingering in the past before everything goes wrong, it happens on his first trip back. And I know for making a gameplay that is enjoyable aspect, that kind of needs to happen, but I think there's an argument to be made that you could have had a little time skip to imply that he'd been doing this for a while. Because his relationships with Chip and Mike don't make as much sense if he's only known them for a couple hours as opposed for like multiple months. So that is clearly a big change. They also obviously stretch the finding your dad portion from 1 night to 5, but that is to make the game a playable game as opposed to the original story. I know I'm here to talk about the differences between the book plot and the game plot, but I do have some opinions on the general game as a whole. One of the best parts of this game, to me, is all of the little Easter eggs that are hidden throughout, as this game exists as a celebration for 10 years of FNAF. So there definitely should be little things that true fans are going to notice and pick up on. There are so many in this game that there are dedicated videos to pointing out all of them and how to find them. This video is not that. However, I do have some favorites that I wanted to mention. So, highlights for me personally. In the prize machine in the past, you can find an Exotic Butters plush, which is a direct reference to FNAF's sister location. Up on some of the walls, you see some paper pals, which they first show up in FNAF 2, though those little guys are everywhere in this franchise. Though, my personal favorite Easter egg is if you call 1-800-0083, which the number can be found on some of the posters on the walls, it will take you to Freddy Fazbear Pizza's direct automated message. Quote, "Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Our pizza of the month is Freddy's personal favorite, the Golden Bite, with exactly 83 slices of cheese smothered in a molten layer of fine exotic butters," which is a reference to Golden Freddy, who's introduced in FNAF 1, the Bite of 83, which is primarily a FNAF 4 reference, but again, is also throughout, Molten Freddy from Pizza Sim, and again, Exotic Butters from Sister Location. Another fun aspect of this game is that after your first playthrough of it, you can then go into the settings and adjust a lot of the different mechanics in it to make it a harder challenge. This includes reducing the number of hiding spots in the game, reducing the number of distraction noisemaker things, having faster animatronics, harder quicktime events, and permadeath. If you're interested in seeing any of these, the Bones 5 has a great video of him completing the hardest challenges built into the game. One thing that I think gets lost in the translation between the books and the games is that we don't really see how the mill closing down affects everybody from an emotional aspect, as we only really see how it drives the story plots forward. By not going to the library, we don't see Oswald recognizing the fact that there's a bunch of homeless people caused by the mill closing. Because we don't go and spend any time really hanging out with Chip and Mike in the past, we don't see Oswald feeling guilty over taking advantage of his new friends, even though they don't believe it to be the case. We don't even get the point where my beloved boy Jeff gives Oswald free pizza because he recognizes Oswald cannot afford it, which is a fundamental reason on why I love his character. Without these little aspects, what gave this story that interesting nuance that most FNAF games are missing is just gone. Anywho, normally I am a stickler for accuracy in book adaptations, but in this case, the original story does not fit in a gameplay way. So the major changes that they do to the story to make it fit in a game, I think work solidly. And most of my problems are weird, small little things that no one cares about except for me because I actually read the book, which no one's going to do. I think both stories do a great job of what they are attempting and setting out to do, even if it is all surrounding a time-traveling ball pit, which is just a weird direction for this franchise that they really do not linger on very long. If you're still around at this point, thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. I am crossing all of my fingers that I haven't messed up along the way on the FNAF lore or any of the gameplay aspects, but feel free to let me know in the comments. Or, just tell me I look pretty. Either way. If you liked this video, I really appreciate you checking out the only other video I've made thus far about why Cinderella should be buff. It is a pretty fun time, if I do say so myself. Anywho, thank you again, and I'll see you the next time a crazy video idea pops into my brain.